morning and welcome to the Christian Life Center. My name is Cecilia. Thank you for choosing to worship with us this morning. If you're new here, please take a look at the inside cover of your bulletin. Here you'll see our next steps page where there are 2 simple steps to take if you'd like to get to know us more. We think this is a really great place to connect with others, and we hope you'll take the time to check out how you can make that happen. If you'd like to speak with someone today, stop by our info center out in the lobby and someone there would be happy to connect with you. Opportunity to support our community and keep our roadways beautiful. The annual New London Community Cleanup Day is April 13th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. with the rain date of Sunday, April 14th. CLC family is invited to take part. Our staff will provide free Big Yellow Mug coffee and help recycle litter that is picked up along the roadways, but we need your help. Check out our calendar section of the website clcfamily.church for all the details. You've probably been hearing about some fun family events we have planned for April. It's been a long winter and we think it's time to have a little fun. Moms, bring your sons out on Friday night, April 12th, and enjoy having some fun with them. Ever feel like shooting them? With the laser gun, well, not only can you do that, but they can safely shoot you back. Enjoy a night of games, food, and fun. And dads, don't feel like you're left out. On Saturday, April 13th, we'll be hosting a father-daughter dance, complete with desserts, a really awesome photo booth, and princesses. Both of these events will be held here at the CLC and will run from 6 to 8 p.m. Tickets are $5 per person and are available to purchase online at clcfamily.church/signups. And the fun doesn't stop there. Join us the following weekend on Saturday, April 20th at 10 a.m. for a huge free Easter egg hunt. We will have different sections for different ages and we'll be posting all that information online. All of these events are open to you, your friends, family, and neighbors. So this is a great time to invite those you know are looking for a place to connect. And speaking of inviting, Easter Sunday is on April 21st, and we will be altering our service times to accommodate more people. Please note that we will have 3 services that week, 8 a.m., 9:30 a.m., and 11 a.m. Kids Zone will be available during the 9:30 and 11 services. We would still love to get more volunteers in Kids Zone to be sure that we can provide childcare to all the families who attend on Easter. Please see Jeanette or leave your name and contact information on the back of your bulletin and place in the offering basket on your way out. For more information about these upcoming events and more, make sure to like us on Facebook at CLC Family, visit us online at clcfamily.church, or download our app by texting CLC Family app to 77977. Thanks for worshiping with us today.
Oh, good morning. Happy to see you all. A couple things. You heard lots going on in April, so make sure to invite your friends, family. Don't forget to buy your tickets for laser tag or the daddy-daughter dance. You can go online at clcfamily.church and do that. That would be excellent. And you heard we're having an egg hunt, and that means we want lots and lots of eggs. So one of the things we're doing, which I'm really, really excited about, by the way, and parents, you may or may not like this. I think you will, though. We are not going to stuff all the eggs with candy. We're actually going to hide thousands, 25, 30, 50, 80, 100,000, somewhere around there, eggs all over this campus. And then the kiddos are going to get them and bring them back to some stations where they'll then exchange the eggs for some goodies. And so that means we can avoid gluten and dairy and all sorts of other allergies. And we're going to try to keep this as candy-free as we can. So there'll be lots of really good goodies. And we want to know that you will want to give your kids Easter egg baskets the next morning where they can wake up, pile sugar in, then come to church and drive our kids' workers crazy. So, in order to do that, here's what we need from you if you're going to participate, or here's how you can participate. When you're at Walmart, Giant, wherever you shop, there's usually big piles of plastic eggs. Would you just buy some of those and bring them here? There'll be the big baptistry, usually that we baptize people in. It'll be out in the lobby starting next week, so bring them with you and we'll just dump them on there and get those ready. So lots and lots of plastic eggs. And the other thing that's really great about having the kiddos exchange the eggs for the prizes is we get to use the eggs again next year. So know that you are buying some eggs, bringing them here, and they'll be used in perpetuity for a long time to come. That's the biggest word I'll use today, and I think I know what it means. I meant to look it up. So I'm Josh. I'm really, really happy to be here with you all this morning. And if you're new, one of the things you just saw was some membership stuff, and you heard all sorts of stuff about all the expectations and commitments. You even heard about giving to the church and going, yeah, that makes me uncomfortable. That's okay that it makes you uncomfortable. We understand that. And there is no pressure on you if you're new. We don't force anything on anyone. You take your time. You hang out as long as you want to. In fact, our agenda today is for you to feel like a part of this family. Before you, anything about you changes, before you even believe all this stuff, whatever that is, we still want you to feel welcome and loved, and we won't ask anything of you, okay? You just participate, you sit there, you spectate, whatever that is. Now, if you so decide, which we'd love for you to do, that you would like us to know that you were here, that would be great for us, but again, no pressure on you. You can do that a couple of ways. In the back of that bulletin you can just jot down your information, and someone on our staff would love to follow up with you this week if you feel comfortable with that. Or after the service, there'll be a couple options. As you head out that way in the lobby, right to the left, there's an info center. You can kind of wave, make yourself known there. Or if you got something going on in your life, you're going, I could actually talk to somebody, I'd like to pray with someone. As people leave at the end of the service, right here to my right, down here in the front, there'll be people available for that as well. And again, none of that is an expectation of you, no pressure. We're not going to make you stand up or do anything weird. Just wanted to kind of lay all that out. Now, what we actually hope happens eventually, just want you to know this, right, is we hope at some point you will decide that you want community and family, and that you will even decide to make some arrangements in your schedule to make that happen. And there's two things that we think are pretty important and want you to consider. Eventually, we want you to go, I want to get out of this row, that's a row, these are the rows, and into some kind of circle, what we call small groups. This, where I actually get to know people, hear their story, they get to know me, hear my story, where I can have some friendships. And so what we hope happens for every single man, woman, and child in this room is eventually you make that decision. And every now and then we roll out some new on-ramps and opportunities to get into small groups. If you're new here, been here for a while, there'll be a new opportunity for that coming in a few weeks right after Easter. Now, if you're interested in hearing anything about small groups, or you're going, I think I'm ready to actually maybe lead or participate in leading or hosting one of those groups, on the back of the bulletin, you can just mark your information, and someone will follow up with you this week about groups. You'll hear more about them as we move further in April. Now, the other thing we hope, and we think this is a pretty simple on-ramp, is that you would decide to show back up here on a Wednesday night. So we got this Sunday morning, and then kind of a really next simple step would be for you to show up on a Wednesday night. And you go, but Wednesday nights I work, and I got to eat dinner, and we're going, we'll feed you baby birds, right? There's really, really good food available to you. There's gluten-free options, there's vegetarian options, and there's meat if you like meat. And so 5:30, we serve a meal together. We'd love for you to come eat it with us. You don't have to RSVP, you can just show up. And then starting about 6:15, there's lots of fun stuff going on around here. In this room, there's what we call Celebrate Recovery. It's for folks that are dealing with any kind of hurts, habits, or hang-ups. Really good community for you to find quick, of people trying to figure out this life and walking through their struggles. Out in the lobby, there's some neat connection opportunities where you're going, I don't want a Bible class. I'm not ready for all that kind of stuff. I just like to make some new friends. That's available out in the lobby. And then we also are teaching some Bible classes upstairs and all sorts of fun stuff. So I want you to be available for all those things. I want you to come and kind of put your toes in the water a little bit. Okay? You got kiddos. There's kids ministry, call it Kids Connect. That's birth through 5th grade on Wednesday nights. And then you got a student. We have middle school and high school ministries here as well. Definitely be worth their time. So that's all the commercials. Really, really want that for all of you. Okay? Again, you are welcome to belong long before you say, I want to become like Jesus. I want to become one of the new church people, whatever that is. You're welcome to come, hang out as long as you want to. No pressure. Okay? Now, since you're all here, let me just kind of update you on what we do on Sundays. Every week we sing a few songs, and then typically someone stands up on the stage and talks at you for a while. I mean, no joke here, probably 50 minutes to an hour. And we work through kind of some topical ideas or some things in the Bible, and usually when we work through it, it takes us multiple weeks because there's a lot of material in the Bible. If you don't know much about the Bible, it's 66 books written by more than 30 authors, and it took over 1,500 years to write. So there's a lot going on there, and so instead of rushing through that, we just kind of pull out some things and kind of work through them kind of methodically over multiple weeks, and that's what we've been doing. And we've been in this series, you can see it right there, called Dear Church. And this is week 13. This is the final week. So if you're brand new here, we expect you to go online and listen to the last 12 all week long, and there will be a quiz next week. And whoever wins the quiz, I don't know, we'll get a golden calf, okay? So anyway, I'm just joking about that, but it is all available online, and don't have kind of time to cover and review all the stuff. But let me kind of give you just a little synopsis of what we have going on. So if you look at the Bible, you got the Old Testament. We'll talk about it in a little while. That's all before Jesus shows up. Then you have the New Testament, okay? In the New Testament, the first 4 books start with Jesus' life. It's a biography. That Jesus shows up on this planet, declares he's God, and that he came to pay the price for all of our sins. That might be confusing for you. We'll set that on the side. We'll get back to that in a little while, okay? And declares all those things, and says that he's God, and therefore is murdered for his beliefs, which would be a really bad thing, but the murder, the crucifixion on the cross, actually becomes a really good thing because he comes back to life and then validates, by coming back to life, all the things that he had said. So as a result of this, all these people who were kind of on the fence, a little skeptical about who Jesus was or said he is, or who he said what he said was available to us, all those folks who were pretty skeptical about that on the front end, when Jesus dies and then comes back to life, there comes this credence for his words. They go, oh, maybe we should believe this. And this crazy thing happens 2,000 years ago where all these people go, we saw him, he was alive, and then he was dead, and then he came back to life, and we're ready to follow him now, okay? And so all these people start following him, and that becomes what the Bible refers to as the ecclesia, okay? That means the group of people called for a specific purpose, like it would almost be like a soldier term, like a military term, a bunch of people who got together and go, we now are going to live on purpose with a mission. And so these people, and that ecclesia is how we get the word, or kind of evolved for us, is the word church. So there's this thing that's been happening for 2,000 years called the church, who should have and should be and has been living on mission. Meaning, okay, now that Jesus is real, we believe he's real, then we're going to live a life that follows him and do the things that matter to him. So the church focused very primarily on 2 specific things. One, Jesus said he came to seek and save that which was lost. That just meant most people in our world are operating with the wrong roadmap. And so the church was focused and is focused on helping people discover that there's a God who loves them, that there's a God who has a plan for them, right? And if you still have a pulse, that means God's not finished with you yet, right? So the church has been helping people kind of understand this God who we would argue, and Scripture would argue, and history probably would point this direction, who this God created us to actually know him and be in relationship with him, right? And so part of the church's mission was to seek and save that which was lost. And then the other part is this. Jesus prayed it when he taught us how to pray. He said, our kingdom come, our will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Meaning, Jesus had this plan, this agenda, that earth would look like heaven. That there would be, at some point, no more pain and no more sorrow and no more tears. All those things that you long for in your heart. Peace and reconciliation and restoration. Jesus said that he came to bring that back in. In the Old Testament, it's the word shalom. Right? This peace that we all long for, none of us have. And so we have this understanding that while it isn't, and yet it will be, and yet we can participate in it now, the goal of the church the last 2,000 years was to slowly and meticulously and steadfastly work to make this planet and this world better. So there's kind of this 2-pronged approach. One, there's this idea that we want people to understand who Jesus is, know how much he loves them and what he did for them, and then help people follow him. And following him includes actually making this world a better place. So that's kind of been the plan, and for centuries, hundreds and thousands of years now, the church tried to stay focused on that and then would get sidetracked, right? And they get sidetracked on silly things like how pretty a building should be, or what color the carpet should be, or which political side they should be on, right? So the church has gotten distracted by things, and I'm not saying they're not important, they're just not the main thing, and this isn't a new thing. Right on early in the church, they got focused on silly things and got focused on self-preservation and protection. And the way by which the church was called back to focus was through the Bible and what now we would call these letters. Okay, so the second part of the New Testament starts with Jesus' history and who he is, showed up, died, came back to life, and then the history of the church. And the rest of it's basically these letters written by these church leaders. So we've gone, okay, if there's letters that have been written by these church leaders to help the church stay focused, and since we're a church, it would make sense we go back to these letters and just make sure that we're on the right path, right? We're not doing a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. We're going right back to the original words from these church leaders going, this is what we were called to. So for 12 weeks so far, we've just been reading different letters. Now, one of the guys that was one of the authors of the letters, in fact, he writes 2/3 of the New Testament. He is the primary author of the in terms of the different letters of the New Testament, is a guy named Paul. We've read about him a good bit. We've read a lot of his letters, and real kind of brief overview of Paul is Paul used to be a guy named Saul. And when he was Saul, he was rich, he was wealthy, and he was powerful, and he was absurdly arrogant. When you think about privilege, Paul was privileged. Now, at that point, his name was Saul, and he had all the entitlement and all the privilege and all the arrogance that comes with those things, right? He was both the judge and the jury. He could make a decision about you, and then that would become your reality, right? And so Saul was arrogant, well-educated. He had both religious authority and political authority. I mean, he was a guy who had it all, and yet he was a wretched man, to the point that he actually murdered people he hated. And the people he hated were the people who stood in the way of him achieving his goals. So he had this belief that there was a God who was pleased by rule followers. Now, he had some intuition, and all these folks did, just like we do, that none of us are really as good at following the rules as we pretend to be. So Paul had this belief that God is pleased by rule followers, and anybody who didn't do the rules that he thought were best, he just murdered. Particularly those who held Jesus at a high standard and go, Jesus actually abolishes the rules and goes, nope, 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 it's all grace. Nope, 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 you're all forgiven. Nope, 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 it's all about my love and grace and forgiveness and mercy that's offered to you. And Saul hated those things. And so when we first find Saul in the scriptures, he's moving in this first century church and he's murdering people. And then on this way to a road one day outside of Jerusalem, that's kind of the Jewish headquarters, he's walking and he has this crazy, supernatural, unlike anything most of us have ever had, I've never had anything like this, interaction with this God, Jesus. So Jesus, post-death, post-resurrection, invades Saul's life, knocks him flat on his face, and says, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He literally goes, when you persecute my children, the same way you'd feel if someone mistreats your children, you are actually doing that to me. And in that moment, Saul has this radical transformation. He goes from this narcissistic, grandiose, arrogant person. So you got those kind of people in your mind? You know any of them? Right? He's the worst of the worst. Whatever you got in your mind, he's worse than that. And in this moment, Saul radically gets transformed, and everything about him changed. He goes from a guy who hates people to loves people, even those who are different than him. In fact, he has this huge compassion for people who are different than him. Right? He has this huge compassion for people who sin differently than he does. Right? And so Saul goes from this grandiose, arrogant control freak to this mild, gentle, not mild's wrong word, meek, gentle, patient, kind human being. And so Saul, who becomes Paul, now has this mission to start churches, and he goes from all over Europe, and then even kind of helping get churches even started over in Africa. Paul goes Middle East, Europe, getting things going, moving towards Africa, right? He starts all these churches. And because his mission was now, how do we help the church, help people understand that God came to save them, love them, and then make our world better, he had this urgency to go from town to town. So he'd start a church, and then he'd move to a new town, start a church, move to another town. Now, in order to keep the churches that he already started, founded, this movement going, he would communicate back with them, and the way that he communicated were letters. So we've been reading these letters going, okay, here's some interesting things. And today we're going to look at a letter that Paul wrote to this interesting city called Corinth. Okay, so he actually writes 2 letters to this city, and it's 1st and 2nd Corinthians. And even if people like to say 2 Corinthians, that's not correct. It's 2nd Corinthians, okay? So you got 1st Corinthians and 2nd Corinthians, and so they're 2 different letters written at 2 different times. Now, the first letter Paul writes, he writes to the church because he's actually concerned about their behavior. They've basically had this new influx of belief that people basically said, just follow your heart, which, by the way, is terrible advice, right? Because our hearts are wicked and deceitful above all things. You go, that's not nice. And I'm going, okay, well, think about it this way. How many times have you followed your heart and wished you wouldn't have? Think about that first boyfriend or girlfriend you had. How'd that work out for you, right? And so this idea that you've all bought a car, signed a lease, done something where it just felt right in your heart, and look back later and go, that wasn't very smart. Right? I have thousands of these stories. Thousands. I shared with you real briefly a while back, and I'll put the picture back up on Facebook today so that you can remember. I had this big dream right after Julie and I got married that I wanted a swimming pool in my backyard, but we didn't have any money. So I dug one. I did. I dug a swimming pool. It was a big pool. It was about half the size of this entire stage. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. So you're going, that's not a smart idea. And I'm going, no, it's a great idea. I was young and in shape, and I should be in a bathing suit in my backyard all day long, right? And so I dug this pool, and it looked really nice for about 3 days, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. You know what I was thinking? $5,000 later, I look back and go, I wish I wouldn't have done that, right? And so we all have these stories, and so we follow our heart and do those things. And the church at Corinth had that kind of motif or that kind of theme kind of creep into their church, which, by the way, is a very similar thing that happens in all churches. It happens in our church. It happens in American churches. It happens everywhere where someone goes, just follow your feelings. Do what feels right? And so that happened, and there were some really, really, really broken things happening in the church at Corinth. And you go, if you think about we're not pointing, not taking shots at our culture, but you look at our culture and go, there is just some complicated things, right? If you got kids, I don't know if you even watch live TV anymore because of the commercials, right? Particularly after about 7 o'clock, it's just done, right? I love March Madness and I love basketball, but I have to sit there with my remote because every one of the commercials my kids can't see. Right? And so, when we go, our culture is so bad, and there is a complicated part. But it wasn't any different 2,000 years ago, right? And so Paul writes this first letter to really correct some really bad behavior. Now, one of the neat things is, and he didn't do it in terms of telling people they're bad. He basically said, if there's a creator who created you and designed you for a certain life in a certain way, it would make sense that your best life would follow that creator's rules. There wasn't any shame on you, wanting to beat you down, wanting to control you. It was going, hey, there is a better way for you to live. There's a better thing to do in your marriage. There's a better way to treat people. There's better things you should probably participate in, right? And so Paul writes this letter, and there's some good course correction. But then after all that kind of gets resolved within the church of Corinth, something new happens. And what happens is these new leaders come in. And they take some shots at new Paul's approach. Remember, old Paul beat people over the head with a hammer. He literally murdered people who didn't believe like he did. He was authoritarian. He was narcissistic. He had no emotional intelligence. And new Paul was meek. He was gracious. He was slow to anger. He was loving, right? He was inclusive of all people. Now, he had some expectations once Jesus came and changed their heart. But prior to that, prior to them not having the Holy Spirit in them, he didn't have any expectations that they would behave like they had Jesus living with them. Right? And so Paul was very gracious and very kind. And these church leaders started pointing out those things and pointing them out as flaws. And they started saying, you need leaders with bravado. You need leaders who can say mean things on Twitter. Right? You need blunt, bold leaders who call a spade, whatever it is, right? And so there was this movement that was happening in Corinth where all of a sudden Paul was being trashed as a guy who couldn't achieve the objective because he was just too nice. He was a pushover. And so these new leaders kind of were showing up, and they were arrogant, and they were proud, and they were bold, and people go, they have confidence. We follow people with confidence. They have swag. We like people with swag. And so this movement starts happening within the church. The celebrity church movement, where the people with the charisma, right? All this stuff started happening. So a couple things just to point out there. It's real easy in the church world, and we got to be really careful here, right, in all places, to confuse skills with maturity or giftedness with wisdom, right? Just because someone's good at something doesn't mean that they're wise. It just means they have some good skills, right? And so these folks who are good at speech, good at leading a crowd, drawing people to them, right? All this charisma, they were kind of jumping in, particularly because Paul was absent, and they were taking shots at Paul's meek and mild approach, and they're going, no, we got to be bold. So Paul, hearing this, goes, oh, there's another letter we got to write within the church. We got to remind them who Jesus is, and we got to talk about these things. And so Paul's going to do something that makes him sick to his stomach. The reason I know is because he tells us he feels like a fool as he's writing it. So Paul is going to do something here. And he's going to write this letter, and he's going to talk about himself proudly. So this is interesting because this talk is going to be on humility. And the minute you bring up humility, humility walks out of the room. right? That's just how that works. And so Paul is going to talk boldly and proudly while trying to be really, really humble. Now, if you're a Christian or non-Christian, this is really important to look at. Because foundationally, okay? For any of us who believe in Jesus, any of us that would call ourselves Christians, at the foundational core level, the way by which that happened for you, okay? Jesus does the saving, Jesus did all the work, all that kind of stuff. But the moment that happened to you was at your moment of greatest humility. Okay? So, in fact, you cannot be a Christian. You cannot engage with the story of the gospel without humility. Like, humility is and this is going to sound hyperbolic and extreme, but I mean this. Humility is the one character trait that is necessary for you to become a Christian. Because humility is saying, I cannot get where I need to go on my own. Humility is saying, I need help. Humility at its greatest level is incredible self-awareness. So, humility is to go in, I am here, I want to be there, and I can acknowledge, and this is, I'm not talking about even the Christian sense. I am here, I want to be there, and I cannot get from here to there by myself. Humility is an acknowledgement of interdependence. Right? And so, in order for those of us who believe in Jesus, there is a reality that we cannot get where we're going without Him. In fact, God is so gracious to us, He gives us 39 books of the Bible, the Old Testament, to help us get this character trait, humility. If you want to know the story of people, it's the story of us going, we got it on our own, and then coming to some kind of conclusion that we don't have it on our own and we need help. Right? Some of you in this room at church today because you said, God, I need help. Right? Some of you are here because your spouse told you to come because you said, I need help. Whatever that is. This idea of Christianity all begins with us admitting we can't get from here to where we were wired to go on our own. And so Paul is going to address this idea of humility in a very great way. And the way that he's going to do it is by comparison and contrast. But he's going to start with the arrogant side. And so here goes. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 21, part B. That means I'm going to jump in the middle of the verse. And he has just said, I feel so weird doing this. This makes me sick to my stomach. I can't believe I'm about to tell you all my accolades in comparison to these other people that you think are really famous. So he's going, hey, all these arrogant guys are telling you they're great. I'm just going to kind of do this, T-chart where I show you how I'm great too. And he's going to tell you over and over again as to how uncomfortable this makes him feel. It's kind of funny. And here goes. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, beginning 21, part B. Whatever anyone else dares to boast about. He goes, I'm speaking as a fool. What I love about Paul and what makes his writing so complicated is he loves his parenthetical phrases. He does not mind stopping a sentence to make another sentence. I mean, he is chasing squirrels everywhere, right? And so whatever anyone else dares to boast about, and he goes, oh man, I'm speaking as a fool. I can't believe I'm saying this. Like, this is so obnoxious. This is so obnoxious, right? Some of you do that with different things. Like you're going to ask someone for help or something, right? But you know what you do before you ever ask them for help? You go, look, if there's any problem, feel free to say no. It's not a big deal if you say no. Hey, like you've already convinced them to say no before you ever ask the question. You know what I'm talking about? And so Paul here's going, oh my gosh, I'm a fool. I can't believe I'm telling you this. Okay, whatever anyone else is about to dares to boast about, I'm a fool for saying this. Oh gosh, I also dare to boast about. So he's literally going, he's kind of creeping in this going, okay, I'm gonna boast too for just a second. Okay, and that's what he says. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abraham's descendants? So am I. So he's going, okay, let's start with the simple things. Are they Jewish? Do they have Jewish pedigree? Can they follow their line all the way back to David and all the way back to Abraham? Are these guys staying there and going, we're so special, you should follow us because our daddies were important, our granddaddies were important, our great-granddaddies were important, right? These are guys who stand up without entitlement and privilege, right? The things they didn't earn, had nothing to do to get, and yet they're holding it up on a sign saying, look how special we are, right? Paul's going, okay, this is their pedigree. I have the same pedigree. Are they servants of Christ? Because they're talking about how godly they are, how well they serve, right? They posted on Facebook. I'm out of my mind to talk like this again. So here we are. We're just now in verse the third verse, and he's already going, gosh, I feel so crazy even saying this out loud. If they're servants of Christ, I'm more. I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. So he's going, look, if they're living like Christ, Christ was tortured, he was punished for his beliefs. Look, these guys might tell you how special they are. The reality is I've been thrown in jail more times. Now he's going to give you even more of a list. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. Jewish law would allow you to beat someone 39 times because the 40th would be the completion of death. They believed that the last lash is the one that would kill you. So 5 times he's been on the brink of death. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. By the way, that's what your kiddos are talking about. Paul's experience in Acts being shipwrecked, right? I spent a night and a day in the open sea. So he's going, I'll list it to you. Whatever they tell you that their hard life has been, the one they got their fame for, the people that got them on Good Morning America, mine's greater than that, right? I have been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from my Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false believers. Anybody think Paul's ever been in danger, right? It's like watching one of those shows, I don't know, pick it out on CBS, the dramas, right? Or any of them where there's gunfights. And you look at these guys, or whatever the show is, right? It doesn't even matter. Even though they can have brilliant minds, they're not even supposed to be in the aggressive or violent fields, right? Every single week, they're about to die. And you look at them and go, at some point, don't you just stop that? Like, don't you get a different job? Like, don't you get a different job? And, like, you would say that to Paul going, okay, at what point do you go, that's enough? I mean, every single day he's waking up and going, I wonder how I'm almost die today, right? And so he just goes through and explains all these things. I have labored and toiled and I've gone without sleep. Mom's like, whatever, Paul, I have known hunger and thirst and I've often gone without food. I have been cold and naked, and that is not a good combination. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak, and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin, and I do not inwardly burn? So he's going to go, look, I've been punished, I've been persecuted, I've been beaten up. So whatever these other leaders are telling you, I've done the same thing, okay? And I've had it worse. And they go talk about how much they love the church. He's going, look, every single night I lose sleep over you people. Every single night I'm concerned about your decisions and whether or not you're walking away from God into an abyss for all eternity. He's going, not only do I struggle with the pain and the sorrow that's come my way as a result of persecution, I wear the weight of the churches and their decisions and whether or not they're being led astray. So he's going, look, I've been persecuted and I have a love for these people. And then he says this, okay, so now that you know all that, if I must boast, see that word? He says, if I must. If you're going to make me talk about this, that's what he's saying, literally. Okay, you're going, Paul, you're not as great as these guys. They're great, and they have 3 million Twitter followers, and you have 3,000, right? If that's what it's going to be like. Paul, we don't want to trust you because these guys are special, you're not even going, oh, I cannot believe you're making me put my LinkedIn account on here, right? But let me tell you, if I must boast, if you're going to make me boast, I will, this is important, this is where it changes. This is where this humility comes from. I will boast about my weaknesses. I'll boast about my weaknesses. So he's basically going, I will talk about the things that I know are wrong with me. Now, that's really uncomfortable for us. But let me just say, for a non-Christian, and I might be speaking on behalf of you, so if I get this wrong, pull me aside later. But I think I've had enough conversations to think it's right. For a non-Christian, the place where they feel comfortable talking to you is not about how much you know and how great you are and how much better you've done at parenting than they have. The place that they find comfort with you is when you talk about where you're flawed and where you're broken and where you've messed it up and where there's someone else who's come through for you, something greater than you, right? Because you talk about how good you are just reminds them that they're really bad or they're really broken. And the story they're telling themselves is, wow, it must just be me. Other people must have it figured out. Other people must have it. Like, I grew up for most of my life in the church, and I'm hearing about this, and I just realized other people didn't struggle with those things. I just thought no one else struggled with it because I walked in church and everybody was putting on their pretty face. I thought other parents didn't fight. I thought other moms and dads got along all the time and always did the right thing to their kids. I thought all those things because I wasn't hearing it anywhere. And so all it did for me was just confirm the fact that I am broken and flawed and there was no hope or no help. Right? And so this is why it's really important in the church that we actually talk about our weaknesses. Now, this is important to also say. When we talk about our weaknesses, we're not just being transparent. It's a cute word. I like transparent. I like authentic. And I used to use these words going, when you're transparent, what that means is people see you and see Jesus. But there's actually some really good research. Brene Brown, and I would highlight as at the top of this research, who's actually kind of pointed out the difference between transparency, just letting all your junk air out, right? Because sometimes that's just uncomfortable. Sometimes you overshare, and it just makes people look at the floor, right? So this isn't just about oversharing and exposing all the stuff in your heart, right? That's transparency. Let me just vomit it all out, right? That we don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with that, right? And so what Brene Brown talks about is the difference between transparency, that's just exposing yourself, right? And vulnerability, that's the key word. In fact, she says the strongest words in the English language, she wrote this years ago, by the way, are me too. Me too, meaning I've had experience like you've had. But the idea between transparency is let me expose myself, let me just get all this out, let me air my dirty laundry. And vulnerability is actually going, I need help. Vulnerability is different than transparency because transparency just gets all that stuff out. Vulnerability actually invites other people in. Right? Transparency just exposes all. Vulnerability explains what's going on in your life, where you're flawed, and invites other people to be a part of the solution. See the difference? One just vomits it out. The other invites people in to be part of the solution. Right? And so what Paul's going, I am actually going to talk to you about my weakness, and I'm going to invite you in the story about the solution. Right? The God, so he's going to keep going, the God and the Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, who is to be praised forever, knows that I am not lying. So he's going, I'm going to tell you about my flaws. Here I go. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be in writing. 2,000 years later, people are going to still be reading it, right? I'm going to tell you about these things. And God knows this is the truth. This is the God's honest truth, is what he's saying here. Now, Paul's a little ADD. Remember, he's chasing squirrels. In Damascus, the governor under King Aretas and the city of the Damascus guarded in order to arrest me. But I was lowered in a basket from a window in the wall and slipped through his hand. So he's going, look, my life's very complicated. I'm going to tell you about all my weaknesses. I mean, I've been arrested so many times. There was one time I literally had to come down in this little bitty tiny basket. And just kind of gives you some more context to the craziness of his life. And he goes back into the main point. Now, I must go on boasting. Again, he feels this obligation to continue talking about this. Although there is nothing to be gained, I will go on to visions and revelations in the Lord. So he said, okay, first I've told you all the stuff that's happened in my life that's given me some resolve. Now let me tell you all the stuff that God's actually spoken individually to me. Okay? I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. A couple of things to point out here. Let me read this last part. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. So one thing is, we know later when we read this that Paul's actually talking about himself in third person. So seems a little arrogant, but it actually is more in humility that he's going, I don't even want to make this about me. Let me just tell you, let me tell you about the experiences I know of God. So Paul's going to talk about this, and he's going to talk about third heaven. Now, he's talking to Hebrew people, and they understand first, second, third heaven. So this is not what we think in terms of heavens. The first heaven is where the birds fly. That's how they refer to it in the Torah, right? Where the birds fly. The second heaven would be where the space shuttles fly, right? So first heaven, where birds reside. Second heaven is outer space, where the moon resides. And third heaven, the way that it was written about in scriptures, is where God resides. Okay? So he's going, I know a man who had this experience with God, and he was called into the third heaven. Now, I don't know if his actual body went there, or if it was just his mind. Don't know. I'm just telling you. I know a man, he's talking about himself, who had this interaction with God. So you think you know God. You're looking for these guys going, they talk about God, they're smart, and they've done great things. They're arrogant and bravado, and obviously they're great leaders. And he's going, but have they been with God? Because I know a man, he's talking about himself, who's been with God. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know. Again, he says this, but God knows. Again, I don't know if it's all of me. It feels weird. I have one of these moments in my life. One of these moments. I just came back from Kenya, and I also had this thing called swamp fever, because apparently you're not supposed to wear open-toed shoes in cow pastures over there, and I did. Something invaded my body, and some of you are now squeamish. You should be, because it was gross and disgusting, and I got really, really sick. And I had this weird moment. After being sick, I kind of came back, and I was staying in this little studio apartment that I lived in. I can remember laying on bed, and I remember dancing with God. I don't talk about it much because it's weird, right? And I'm like, I think it might be my sickness, I don't know. But I just remember in that moment, I was a grown dude, and I was just kind of leaning into God, and everything felt good, right? And I feel so uncomfortable about this, and I know it wasn't, I didn't go up to some third heaven, I don't think. I'm just telling you, I don't like talking about it because it's very uncomfortable. The only experience I have with me and God like that, where I am just embraced by God. In the middle of, I offer him nothing at this point. I can't do anything. I'm just dead to the world almost, just sick. And I just have that moment. It seems so weird. It's Paul's going, look, I have this thing, I'll tell you, but it's weird. You're just going to look at me funny, right? And so I don't know if it's in the body. I was caught up to paradise. That's the third heaven. That's heaven. And heard inexpressible things that no one is permitted to tell. I'm telling you, I had this experience with God, and I can't even talk to you about it. You won't get it. You won't understand it. I can't even explain it. It's like explaining, calculus to a 3-year-old. That's what this would be like, right? I will boast, he says this, I will boast about a man like that. You want me to boast about something? I'll boast about a man like that. I'll tell you about those moments where this guy, who happened to be him, was hanging out with God. I will boast about that experience. I'll boast about how that felt, right? I'll boast about a man like that. But I'm not going to boast about myself. Except, here it is again, about my weaknesses. Now, he goes on again. Even if I should boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. So look, everything I tell you, I can tell you these things. I can tell you about my pedigree. I can tell you about all the stuff I experienced, because it's all true. It's actually my story, and I could talk about it. And you would sit for hours, and you'd be wowed, and you'd ask me to write books on this. Like, you'd be really, really impressed. I could lean into this, and I could get my celebrity on. Right? I could, and I'd be right to do it, because these are all true stories. People can write about their 90 minutes in heaven. I can write about my experiences if I want to. Oh, I could. I could write about these things. I have every right to, because these are true and these are real. I could do all that. But I refrain, so that no one will think more of me than is warranted, or by what I do or say, or because of these surpassingly great revelations. So he's going, look, I could do all that stuff. I could talk to you about how famous I am, how special I am. But all it's going to do is distract you from who you should be looking at. Like, have you ever thought about this, guys? Like, when we go, church leaders particularly, but some of you didn't do this, right? Well, when you go to big conferences or interact with these great Christian authors and communicators, we ask them to sign our books. You got this? We ask some human being who has this revelation that came from God to sign books, and we hold them in such great esteem. Right? We look at these great Christian, the word celebrity here, and we hold them as some great esteem, as they're extra special, extra unique. And Paul's going, look, I can tell you about those things, but do you understand that they are all humans? We are all humans, and there is nothing that we can do to get us from here to there with God on our own. So there is nothing extra special about any human being that makes them the great one. There is no leader, and I'll tell you, this is where it gets really broken in church world. We hold people up to this level of esteem. Please don't do that to me. I will fail you at some point. And then when people fail, we are crushed. And then we go, none of this must be true. If that guy did that, if that lady did that, then none of this must be true. And Paul's going, look, the only truth is, we are broken and we're flawed. So they go, look, I can tell you about how special I am. And I could try to get all you as followers and make you really impressed. But all that's going to do is make you follow me. But the goal isn't for you to follow me, it's to follow Jesus. And so he's going to continue, and this is what he says. Therefore, as a result of all this, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. So he's going, let me tell you how gracious God is. And I'll tell you, I so appreciate this. This morning I got in my Jeep, had a great weekend. Everything was great. Enjoyed it. We went to Valley Forge on Friday, rode bikes. I mean, it was just glorious. We had kids played basketball yesterday morning. It was great. Had a lot of fun. And then we hung out in our neighborhood all day, and it was just glorious. And finally, we just had lots of car trouble. I'm finally like, yep, got my life back. Everything's good. Like, this is get back my routine. I'm back in control. I get in my car this morning. I go to turn the key, and nothing. It's not the battery, so don't ask me if I checked the battery. Checked all sorts of stuff, right? And just then it's just like deflated again, going, oh man, like somehow I thought I was back in control and everything was back underneath my little umbrella and realm, that everything was back where I needed it to be, right? And Paul's going, look, God was so gracious to me because he knew I had a propensity, he knew it before, to narcissism or arrogance or whatever that is. And God continues to give me this place that I just can't overcome, this place where I continue to fail, this thorn in the flesh. Let me just be clear, that's sin. So Paul had this brokenness in his life, this flaw where he could not follow God perfectly and he could not please God perfectly, that he literally let God down. The guy who writes 2/3 of the New Testament has this thing that continues to, he uses the word, torment him, a place of shame, a place of sorrow, a place when he's alone at night, he doesn't like that thing, right? And he talks about that here, and he goes, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. So he said to me, no, Paul, let's not be impressed with what you do right, because none of that gets you to heaven. None of that does, because you cannot be perfect enough to make yourself right before me. So one of the things that I hope our church, and if you're a non-Christian, please hear this, I hope you're marked with humility. I hope you're marked to the place that you continue to talk about where you are flawed and where you are broken. Not to celebrate how many stupid things you did or the stories you did or, walk through your walk of shame, whatever that is. Because in those moments, that's where God says, where Paul says, his power is made perfect in our weakness. Meaning, it is in that moment where we acknowledge that we are broken and can't fix ourselves, that he invades and fulfills. When there is a gap, he fills the gap, right? And so he goes, in my power, as in my weakness, his strength is known. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Have you thought about that term? My power is made perfect in weakness? He's actually saying something really important here. He's actually saying, when you acknowledge in humility that you're weak, that's the greatest place of supernatural events that could ever happen. This is the place that you see that he talked about his power, his might. Remember, he spoke the world into existence. How else do we get here? No other worldview wraps their mind around that any better than going, there was nothing and then there was something, and he spoke it. What kind of power does that require? He spoke it into existence, but he didn't even say, he said that was good. But here he talks about it being perfect. His power is made perfect. Not when we get our accolades, not when we get some big celebration, not when we build a bigger building or have hundreds more people. He says his power is its greatest. It's actually perfect in the middle of our weakness. Right? Because we have to go, well, what's the goal of all this? The goal is for us to be with him, and we cannot do that on our own. It's really simple. Let's go on this. Let's go on. If the cost of admission for whatever you want to go to is higher than you can pay, there's only one of two options. You don't go, or someone else pays. Right? This is elementary. If the price of the party, if the admission, the seats, whatever it is higher than you can afford, your option is either not to go or let someone else pay. And Paul's going, the price of admission to get with God in perfection for all eternity is death from a perfect human being. It is a perfect human being who pays the price for our sin. It is God himself paying the price. Someone has to pay the price, and perfection has to pay the price, and we are not perfect, so we can't pay the price. So our options are one of two things. Either we don't get God, or someone else pays the price. And in this moment, Paul's going, in my weakness, I realized I couldn't pay this, so I lost that whole silly belief system. And instead, I realized that Jesus pays it. And it's actually when I admit my flaws that he pays the price of admission, which means I get into the party, and that's where his power is perfected. Amen. And he continues, he says this, that is why, only reason, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then, because of Christ, I am strong. Amen. So here's what we got to know, church. And here's what you got to know if you're not a Christian here. But first to the church, folks. The best thing we can do is celebrate where we've messed it up and God has met us there. Our church should be known as a place that just acknowledges that we're flawed, we're not perfect husbands and wives and parents. Right? Wouldn't that just be a big relief? I find it every time I'm around other parents who don't like their kids every now and then. Right? it wouldn't be nice for us all come to some conclusion that, man, we are flawed. Doesn't mean we celebrate our flaws and go, yay, we're all flawed. It means together Christ actually fills that gap. So wouldn't it be great if our entire church was known as a place that just admits that we can't fix ourselves, but points to the one who can? Like, if you're not a Christian, wouldn't that be a really great place to keep coming back and go, wow, those people have enough emotional intelligence to know that they're not any better than anyone else. So what this means, very simply, is what do you struggle with? What do you struggle with? Instead of hiding it, instead of pretending like it's not there, why don't we invite people into it? Invite people into it. What do you struggle with? Because every single human being in this room has things they want no one else to find out. Because we struggle. What if we actually decided to invite people into that? Which, by the way, is why small groups are so important and why you should come to Celebrate Recovery on Wednesdays. Because you're going to be around honest people who admit this. And I am convinced that we conceal these things because we don't understand the damage that concealment does. And we don't confess it because we do not understand the damage of concealment. And so, here's kind of a simple thing of what Paul's trying to help us understand. I want to point this out. The band's going to come up. Two really important passages that kind of point to this, and I want you to make sure you understand them, written by other really great church leaders from letters. One is John the Beloved, and one James, Jesus' brother. And the first thing he says, and this is John talking about how we go from death to life, how we get a mission, how do we cross over. And this is what John says. He says this: If we confess sins, he is faithful and just, and will forgive us of our sins, and purify us from all unrighteousness. So what Paul's going, his power is made perfect in our weakness. When we acknowledge we can't fix ourselves, and we go, God, we're sorry. God, we admit it. In humility, we go, we can't get from here to where we need to be, which is you for all eternity. Will you forgive us? And it says he is faithful and just, meaning he always keeps his word, and it's the just thing to do. He goes, I was already beaten up for that. Quit beating yourself up over it. He is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins. Now, one thing that I lost sight of for so long, and many of you have too, is you thought, okay, I become a Christian, I pray the prayer, and it just goes away. And yet, here you are, months, years, decades later, and you are still struggling and battling the same thing, and you cannot find freedom from it, and you can't find healing. In fact, some of you have even questioned whether or not God's real because you keep confessing that same sin over and over again, and it's still the same scenario, and you can't get freed from it. You will not find healing. Hear this. You will not find healing just by telling God you're sorry. You'll find forgiveness for all eternity. You'll be made right. But that's not where you find healing. In fact, Jesus, his brother James, he tells us where healing comes from. This is what he says. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. See that? Confess your sins to God. That's where you get forgiveness. You are made right before God. But if you really want to walk in some freedom, you got to be vulnerable. You got to invite people in. Confess your sins one to another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. So if we're going, humility is the goal, then let's be vulnerable and let's invite other people into our life. And so this leads to a couple things. As we think about this, one, as we sin, as we struggle, it reminds us we're not in control. That would be a bad thing if someone wasn't in control. But in those moments we go, I am not in control, but God is in control, and we can lean in and trust him. When we think about him being in control, then we can rest going, well, everything he said will come true. Everything we know about him, that the enemy will flee, that heaven will be ours, that we will one day be completely restored. When we think about our flaws, we go, we can't fix ourselves, but God can. And then we go, okay, this is what we know about God and what he does. So a couple things will happen. We're going to stand and we're going to sing, and we're going to sing very clearly about what we know about God. Now, I just told you that some of the problem is that we got to confess and pray for one another. So one of the unique things that's going to happen today, doesn't always happen. Usually it happens after the service. But as we sing, if you want to, no pressure, no one's watching, and that kind of stuff, you can wait till after the service. Down to my right, right there to my right, we'll have some folks already down here that'll be happy to pray with you. So you're going, I don't even want to get through the song, hear the benediction. I'd just like to pray for someone now. So if you're one of our prayer team, would you go ahead and come forward a few minutes early, and would you just meet folks here? And that's up to you, no pressure. You can stay where you are, no judgment. But if you're going, nope, I need to confess, or I need to pray because I need to find healing, it's available to you. You know how I know? Scripture promises it. So either God's not real, and we've just wasted an hour and a half of your time, or he's very real, and everything we just read is true, and is available to you for now and forever. So would you stand with me as we sing?